Ah, summer. Everybody loves summer, right? The scorching summer in your skin, the constant dehydration, the swarm of mosquitoes coming to suck the blood out of you, and what they see today they are starting to edit this video? Yeah. But what could summer inspire in a Touhou fan? Well, we haven't really had a Touhou summer team game nor characters in the series until now. We have the Aki sister for autumn, Letty for winter, Lily White for spring, and for summer I guess the closest we have is Yuka and Eternity Larva, but they aren't exactly summer exclusive team, and Touhou 16 doesn't really count as a summer game since, it's named Eden Star in the 4 seasons, not Eden Star in summer. But hold up! What is that thing washed ashore and covered by the sand on the beach? Oh yeah, baby. The year is 2009. Modern Warfare 2 COD lobbies are as toxic as ever. Wii Fit ends up becoming the 6th best-selling game of the year for some reason, and Touhou fans are eating up the latest release of Touhou 12. And amidst all the speculation of how soon could continue the huge success of the series with the release of Touhou 13 on the horizon, three random Japanese dudes get together and create the studio primary color space to attempt what no one has ever dared to do before, to make a full-on Flash Danmaku game. In Flash! That game would end up being Touhou Marine Benefit. The one that started it all, as some old dead Danmaku player would say, or at least I hope they would say that. Marine Benefit is such an important stepping stone in the realm of Touhou fan games. While yes, not the first in its kind to use the Danmaku format as the gameplay style, it's certainly among the first ones that brought it to a scope like never before, turning it into a full-on Flash game so with original characters like something Zoom would actually make. This whole game existence is mainly based on a really old Touhou theory that Touhou 13 would be set as an underwater team, since well, Touhou 12 was sky themed and Touhou 11 was ground themed, as a kind of way to end off the trilogy. While yes, that may sound completely insane by today's standards, I will remind you that pretty recently, people were actually unironically convinced that Touhou 20 would have been set in the outside world because the inscription on Reimu Longest Goe looked like a city. You rarely hear people talk about this game nowadays, and the reason for that is simply because the game is certainly a relic of its time, with all of its jankiness that you would expect from a first attempt at making a fully fleshed Touhou fan games in Flash of all engines. But the game managed to survive through the years and the death of Flash, thanks to an updated and downloadable version released in 2013 and an amazing English patch released only last year, published by none other than Mega Man Omega of all people, the guy who basically analyzes every single Touhou stage like 20 times better than I do it. So huge thanks to him and everyone who worked on the modern English patch for keeping this game alive and accessible in the year of our Lord 2026, since I'm 99% sure, but I couldn't find confirmation that the Flash version of this game is plain out lost media, since the only proof I could find of existence was this video. I want to do a little trip down memory lane for a game that I have mainly no nostalgia for, since I am a wee little lad into fandom years, as some Scottish man would say, and really analyze this game to see if it still holds up after 17 years from its Flash days, and maybe unlock some core memories of someone playing this on their old Windows XP computer. So without further ado, let's see what Touhou Marine Benefit was all about. The first thing that we will cover is the game story. The plot is started when a small lake in Gensokyo, not Misty Lake this time around, suddenly becomes an entire sea that keeps on expanding and expanding and engulfing Gensokyo, making it at risk of being completely submerged in it. Already bonus points at the writing for making an actual threat to Gensokyo for once. So either Reimu, Marisa, or Sanae, if you like playing as a cringe lord. Wait, nuclear shot type? Okay, I take it all back. Sanae is awesome! Pull out their frog floaties and blue witch outfits and dive right into investigating. No pun intended. Going stage by stage 1 consists in the protagonists going down a river to reach the mysterious giant sea, where they encounter Kohona Susanomori, who is basically Mamizu before Mamizu was even a thing. Can't believe Zune copied a character from a Fangame, a game that glasses and 30 plus different users appearances in printwork and called it a day. They defeat the Mamizo bootleg and move on to stage 2, where they find themselves on the shores of the giant sea. And instead of finding someone selling seashells on the seashore, they find this goofy looking girl called Naruko Uzushima, who unironically looks like the bastard child of Nitori and Jun. But instead of being a greedy bitch like one of her two parent alphas, she's just a normal bitch who wants to drown people in whirlpools and eat them Romeo style, except during Sanae's scenario, where she had a complete reusable crash out over there, because Sanae dared to say that she had no dream. Like, bitch. Know your place, you frapping looking ass. You're a little insulting my favorite design from this game, but more on that later. Anyway, they easily send her back into Whirlpool Loser's Zone and move on to stage 3, where they finally arrive at the sea and encounter everyone's favorite character as a mid-boss. Me. Yo Amazu, everyone loves and knows Mio, right? Well, it seems that Mio's way to show compassion for the victims of the sea is to just attack them. But after they ghostbuster, they encounter at the end of the stage this folk granny named Tsubame Minazuki, who goes on a ramble all like, back in my days, we didn't have any goddamn humans on the sea. And I guess attacks the area out of pure spite for the younger generations, like a true hag would do. Sorry, Yukari fans, but just because a woman looks like they're above their 40s doesn't mean you can call them egg, even if it's part of anime culture. They get Grandma back to bed and finally dive into the ocean itself with the power of magic to breathe underwater and get to the bottom of it in record time, encountering the only person who could outsmoke Snoop Dogg. Kasumi Shindu, who after the most unasked for plot explosion ever, she uses her fetish shit blunt to make them high and hallucinate things. And holy shit, is that the Tower of Pisa? Looks like we got another fellow Italian added to Touhou Girls roster finally. After being defeated, the female Snoop Dogg over here tells them that the ones behind the incident are located in a giant underwater mansion called the Hall of Oceanic Blessing that is located not far from there. They enter the mansion and go down the most PS1 looking hallway ever, and okay, that was the most FNAF 2-esque entrance I've ever seen in a Touhou game, but anyway. The woman responsible for that amazing performance is none other than Megumi Yaobi, the headmaid of the mansion, who clearly points out a literal crime is being committed with all of this breaking and entering. And before you say anything, yeah, Reimu herself jokes about asking her if she can stop time to draw the mid-parallels like a tall LARPer would say to make people laugh. They defeat Megumi and finally reach the deep inside of the hall and meet the mastermind behind the whole incident, Mikoto Yaobi, who explained that she created the sea to allow a better ecosystem for the marine life of Gensokyo to thrive in. Too bad that the only two people who support that are Wakasegime and Murasa, but anyway, it's time for the final battle between the land and the sea of Gensokyo to finally start. Mikoto is finally defeated and things go back to normal since, it can't be a Touhou plot without things going back to the status quo like in a Family Guy episode, but since this is supposed to be a complete Touhou fan game through and through, there is also the extra stage where the heroines meet this little girl called Otoime Kampukuku. Otoime actually gives the whole picture of the game plot. Basically, since she owned a magical salt mill that she had no use for, she ended up giving it to Mikoto to help her expand the small lake that she lived in. But since the salinity levels end up becoming too high, to prevent all the underwater seeing from becoming more salty than Burger King fries and die, she was forced to use her own powers to expand the lake into a giant sea of the incident. And after pulling a Nekatia mid-fight by summoning her past and future version of herself, all the protagonists come together to use the power of friendship in the final spell card to finally defeat her. And it is basically all the plot of the game. Thematically, the game places a lot of emphasis not only on the theme of the marine, but also on the theme of life and being born, especially reflected in Mikoto's design that is shown carrying two DNA strings, and also by the fact that the game places a lot of importance also on the three main colors, red, blue, and green, from which all the other colors are born in a way, kind of like all Earth living beings originally evolved from marine creatures. And this whole color thing is not only reflected in dialogue with characters using these three main colors a lot in their expression and referring to them constantly, with Mikoto's final speech bringing it all together with the theme of life, but also in the three main playable characters, with each one of them representing one of the three colors, explaining why Marisa felt like wearing blue for such an occasion. I think that the game's writing is pretty average overall. While it isn't anything exceptional and really isolated from connection with the other Touhou canon games lore-wise, it's not that bad of a story, and a fangame doesn't always need to be connected to prior games and can still be its own little thing and be enjoyable regardless. Now we get to finally talk about my favorite part of this game, the gameplay. Like any other Touhou fan game, this game has its own special mechanic in the form of the power of HUO. You have these little triangles on the side of the screen that are brought down when you collect oxygen and hydrogen bubbles that enemies drop. The orange meter is tied to oxygen and the blue one is tied to hydrogen. When you reach the triangle threshold, you get a life and a bomb respectively, and the only way to obtain them is via this method. It's a really simple system, just tying lives and bombs to meters instead of collecting them or their pieces directly, and personally I find it pretty fun, even if most of the time it can make you fall into the trap of extreme greed over dodging bullets. Also, as a little extra, your hydrogen bar also lowers your point of collection the lower it is, and you can also get oxygen by grazing, a really good farming method, especially for the later stages. This game, Danmaku, is some of the most creative I have ever seen in a fangame period. I was honestly amazed by how creative some boss mechanics were when I encountered them. The first one is present in stage 4 during Kasumi fight, where she uses these alternating bullets that activate and deactivate every 5 seconds intervals. At first, I found this kinda too hard to go against, but over playthrough, I came to really appreciate this mechanic a lot more, since it always keeps the fight on the move, forced me to actually learn a focused movement for once. Always talking about Kasumi, the alternating bullets are not the only tricks she has up her sleeve. She also creates these hallucinations in the form of reflections of the other two main characters that you didn't choose, as they create color-coded Danmaku to attack you with. For Megumi Fight in Stage 5, the spell cards involve her creating these bubbles that you have to stay inside to not, well, die, creating some very peculiar movement pattern in some attacks. Now, are these bubbles cool as a concept? Yeah. Are they fun to go against? Fuck nah, bro. You basically don't even get a millisecond outside the bubble that you instantly die, making this such a frustrating mechanic to go against. It would have been as bad if you had maybe like a 3-second timer to step inside the bubble before you died, but no. Every time you see one of these, you always go, ah shit, it's the bubbles again, for how punishing this mechanic feels. While there are other special mechanics that she makes the background and camera move around during some of her non-spells to fuck up your depth perception and make you run into bullets. For Mikoto, her main special mechanics that for most of her attacks, she infinitely summon fairies to either shoot at you or to shield her from your shot. But thank God that at least the destroyed fairies drop resources in their last spell card, creatively named Marine Benefit. Instead, for Otohime, Otohime is a whole different breed of uniqueness. All of her non-spells and spells are some of the most convoluted shit I have ever seen in a Touhou fan game. In a fun way, of course. Such insanely unique Danmaku that it's insane that so much innovation could come from a 2009 Flash game of all things. In fact, I am even more surprised how the devs actually managed to code Danmaku in Flash of all engines. And for the amazing cherry on top, a lot, and I mean a lot of the spell cards in this game are unique depending on the player character that you play as, with Otoime having a whole entire fight, start to end, different for each single character. I absolutely adore this mechanic. It makes each playable character feel even more unique and special than they already are. And I wish if you guys would recommend me down in the comments some other fan games who play heavily into this, since I would adore to play them if they do these unique spell cards for each character team. As for the shot types, without going too much into detail into each of them to add useless runtime to the video, Reimu is well, standard Reimu, usable as always, and I think that their C-shot is the best one in the game overall. Marisa is all focused on stacking as many bombs as possible, but still remains usable, even when her C-shot bomb just turns the screen blue while absolutely destroying the resolution, and Sanae, well, Sana is good at crowd control, but absolutely piss poor against bosses. The nuclear shot turned out to be really underwhelming in the end, and you unironically can't see shit 90% of the time while using it, so I can go back to waiting on Sana now, thank god! I really like praising in this game the Maku patterns and special mechanics for how fun and unique they are, even for the first 3 bosses that don't have a special set mechanic. Naruko like spell in particular is my favorite one of them all. I really like the Whirlpool spiral bullets were a shit ton of fun to dodge for how simple the pattern may be. But it's not like the game's gameplay is perfect or anything. This is a 2009 Touhou Fangame after all, so it suffers from a huge balancing issue even on easier difficulties, since Touhou 11 and Touhou 12 set horrible standards of difficulty for the series. In the same boss fight, you'll have some spell cards that will just have you go, that's it, and some others that we have to go, okay, this is bullshit, this is pure actual bullshit. By that I mean that some of these game spell cards, even for how creative they may be, are just not fun in the slightest to go against for how unfair they feel, especially the bubbles ones. At this point, unironically, the recommended way to not deal with their awful bullshit is to bomb them to completely skip them entirely, and that is not good Danmaku game design in the slightest when the players feels like they have to avoid playing your spell cards to not have a miserable experience. And I guess that having every single stage, including stage 1 and stage 2, have a mid-boss is one of the choices of all time in terms of those stage design. At last, as a final challenge and bonus, the game gives you access to Omniverse mode, which are basically overdrive spellcard challenges like in Touhou 13, or to reference another fangame, Fantastic Danmaku Festival, where you try to capture extremely hard unique spellcards to dodge, tailored to each boss. While yes, the game feels modern in a lot of things, it's certainly held back by the technical limitation in which it was originally built in. Even the modern release of the game outside of Flash has a lot of weird technical stuff, like the fact that the only way to remap buttons is via using a controller for some reason, or the fact that I couldn't get the game to run in full screen since the configuration pattern for the launch option looks like this. And I ain't learning no Japanese from a Touhou fan game like a Japan laser would learning for the favorite anime intro. Before moving on to the last part of the video about the game's music, I feel like that we have to address the giant elephant in the room like how RGG does it, the art style. Now, I know that the average player and Touhou fan might look at this game and say that it looks like boiled dog water. In fact, I discovered this game's existence entirely from Key Connoisseur video when he mentioned bad art style in Touhou games and brought this game up. But personally, I'll say that I'm not really in a place to judge it too harshly since I'm not an artist in the slightest and can draw on digital for shit. And I don't think the game's art is like really that bad. I like the character portraits for how they're drawn. They replicate the Zune art style of the time really well, and the character designs are kinda creative, like something Zune would actually make and put in one of his games, with my favorite one design and personality wise being Naruko, since you know, I like unapologetic assholes as a character archetype and she looks silly, but I recognize that, yeah, basically everything else outside of the character portraits themselves looks rough to say the least. But you have to keep in mind that this game was designed for Flash, so obviously not too much importance was placed in things that would have been destroyed by the resolution of Flash anyway. For the final part of the video regarding the music, I say that the music is certainly something that holds up quite well even today. The game mostly tries to replicate Zoom music and actually succeeds quite well in this, shining especially for the stages host with really good ones like Stage 3 and Stage 5, with Stage 5 especially reminding me of a certain songs that is making the way on Instagram Reels recently. Even the boss teams themselves aren't actually like that bad. You got some of them that just kinda fall flat like Otoime team. You also got the most popular one being Mikoto's teams as well. It simply slaps and see their chat? I can actually like popular things for once, contrary to popular belief. But my favorite one of them among them all is definitely Naruko, since it sounds very evil indeed at the start. And no, I won't stop the Naruko glades, it's that deserved. There is also out there on YouTube a remastered version of the soundtrack, but it's not even that much of a necessary glow up for these tracks. Most of these songs are really listenable even by today's Touhou music standards, despite their age, so I recommend giving them a listen if you want to hear something similar to Zoom music but not quite made by Zoom. Except Stage 1 Team. Stage 1 Team is so shit that it's straight up obnoxious to listen to. But I feel like we can't talk about this game music without mentioning the overall sound design. This game is really lacking in sound effects for basically almost everything, making it kinda awkward to have stages just be filled in by the music alone and basically have no spell card attack sounds, which is a crime by itself, no shot sounds, not even stage transitions between stages, even if that might be more of a technical issue due to Flash engine limitation, at least on the graphics side. So stages in general just feel kind of awkward to play through. At this point, you might as well have your YouTube playlist playing in the background if you don't like the game music. Overall, Touhou Marine Benefit is a game that surprised me in more ways than one. Coming to this game, I expected to play a NAS, half-baked, boring and forgettable Fangame who should have stayed in the era of MLG trickshots of the internet, but it proved me really wrong. For a first attempt at something of its scale, it's truly impressive with some really good mechanics and creative Danmaku for the time. I think this game is a perfect example that you don't need insane graphics or visuals to make a good game. A game can look as shit as you want, but if it's fun to play, it's simply fun. No one can remove that fact, and most people will be willing to overlook the visual aspect of it. I can see how much this game and its innovation in scale and ideas was such an inspiration for all the subsequent Danmaku fan games that came out in later years. Even if the game is mostly forgotten nowadays, all that's in the Touhou community still remember it fondly out of nostalgia for what it was. But personally, I want to go beyond the nostalgia and really recommend everyone who got to the end of the video to give this game a shot, to remember its characters once more and recognize it for what it meant for Touhou fangames as a whole, because I think that for the influence that this game had on the Danmaku fangame genre, this game was, and still is, one hell of a marine benefit. Thanks for watching!